Mark lived alone in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. The kind of neighborhood where lawns were trimmed on Saturdays, kids rode bikes until sunset, and nothing ever really happened. Mark was 38, recently divorced, and worked from home as a medical billing auditor. His days were repetitive, his nights silent. That silence was something he had learned to appreciate after years of arguing, slamming doors, and emotional exhaustion. One night in early October, Mark woke up at exactly 2:17 a.m. He didn't know why. No sound, no dream, no nightmare. Just a sudden, sharp awareness. The room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of his digital clock. As he lay there, listening, he heard something subtle but unmistakable. Breathing. It wasn't his. The sound was slow, controlled, and coming from somewhere near the foot of his bed. Mark's first thought was that he was still dreaming. His second thought was that he had forgotten to turn off the fan, even though he never slept with it on. But the breathing had pauses. Intentional pauses. Human pauses. His heart began to pound so loudly he was sure whoever was in the room could hear it. Mark stayed perfectly still, barely daring to breathe himself. Seconds passed. Then minutes. The breathing stopped. Mark told himself to move, to turn on the light, to do anything. But fear has a way of locking the body down, and he stayed frozen until exhaustion eventually pulled him back into sleep. When morning came, sunlight flooded the room, and embarrassment replaced fear. He laughed at himself, blaming stress, loneliness, and overactive imagination. Until he noticed the closet door. It was open. Mark was meticulous about his routine. He always closed the closet door. Always. Inside, nothing looked disturbed at first glance, but something felt wrong. The air smelled stale, heavier than the rest of the room. When he looked closer, he saw faint impressions in the carpet, just inside the closet, as if someone had been standing there for a long time. He called the police. They searched the house thoroughly. No signs of forced entry. No missing items. No fingerprints. No explanation. They suggested a bad dream and left. That night, Mark couldn't sleep. He set up his laptop on the dresser, webcam facing the room, recording. Around 2:14 a.m., the camera captured something that still circulates among investigators to this day. The closet door slowly opened. No one stepped out, but the sound of breathing filled the room. Mark woke up screaming at 2:17 a.m. again. This time, he ran. Police later discovered a narrow crawlspace behind the closet wall, one that connected to multiple houses on the block due to a construction shortcut taken decades earlier. Inside that crawlspace, they found food wrappers, a blanket, and a notebook. The notebook contained dates, times, notes about Mark's schedule. The last entry read, "He wakes up when I breathe too close." The person responsible was never found. Mark sold the house and moved out of state. He refuses to sleep in complete darkness to this day. In the summer of 1997, 4 college friends from Northern California decided to take a road trip that would cut straight through Nevada. They were young, restless, and convinced that nothing truly bad could happen to them. Daniel was the driver, confident and loud, always cracking jokes. Sarah was practical and cautious, the one who double-checked maps and fuel levels. Mike and Jenna sat in the back, feeding off the excitement and the thrill of doing something reckless just to break routine. They left late in the afternoon, planning to drive through the night to avoid the heat. By the time they reached State Route 375, the sky was pitch black, and the desert stretched endlessly on both sides of the road. No towns, no lights, just asphalt cutting through emptiness. The radio faded in and out, struggling to find a station. Around 11:40 p.m., the temperature gauge on the car began to climb. At first, Daniel ignored it, tapping the dashboard like that might fix the problem. Then steam rolled out from under the hood. He swore and pulled over near a battered road sign half buried in sand. They stepped out of the car, and the silence hit them immediately. The kind of silence that presses against your ears. No wind, no insects, nothing. Daniel popped the hood, and a wave of heat rushed out. That's when Jenna pointed to the sky. Lights hovered in the distance, low and steady, glowing faintly above the horizon. At first, they looked like headlights, but they didn't move the way vehicles should. They drifted slowly, almost lazily, then split apart into 2 separate points of light. Daniel laughed and made a joke about aliens. Sarah told him to stop. Something about the lights made her uneasy. They weren't blinking. They weren't fading. They were just there, watching. Without warning, the car radio turned on. The volume was low, but the sound was clear. Static, followed by a distorted male voice. It began reciting numbers. Calm, precise, over and over again, a sequence of coordinates. Mike reached inside and shut the radio off. It turned back on. The engine coughed once and then died completely. The dashboard went dark. Panic set in fast. No cell service. No passing cars. Just desert and those distant lights. Footsteps approached from the darkness behind them. All four of them turned at the same time. A man stepped into the glow of the headlights. He was tall and thin, wearing an old military-style jacket that looked decades out of place. His hair was neatly combed, and his smile was wide but stiff, like he was forcing it. His eyes never quite focused on any one of them. He asked if they needed help, his voice flat and strangely calm. Relief washed over them, even Sarah, though something about the man made her skin crawl. Daniel explained the situation, and the man nodded slowly. He said there was a service station about a mile down the road and offered to guide them. Sarah hesitated. She suggested staying with the car. But the idea of standing in the dark desert alone felt worse than following a stranger. Against her instincts, she agreed. They walked single file behind the man, the road illuminated only by moonlight. He didn't speak again. His footsteps made almost no sound. The further they walked, the more wrong everything felt. The night seemed unnaturally still, like the world was holding its breath. Halfway down the road, Daniel whispered that this was a bad idea. That they should turn back. The man stopped walking. Without turning around, he said, "You're already late." His voice didn't sound human anymore. It echoed slightly, like it was coming from somewhere far away. Then he stepped off the road and disappeared into the desert. There was no sound of footsteps fading away. No rustling. He was just gone. Panic exploded. They ran back toward where they thought the car was, but the darkness played tricks on their eyes. When they finally reached the spot, the car was there. The hood was closed. The engine was running. The radio was still on. The voice continued reciting numbers, but the sequence had changed. They didn't wait to understand it. Daniel slammed the door, threw the car into gear, and drove. None of them spoke until the first gas station lights appeared nearly 40 minutes later. Inside the station, they tried to explain what happened. The clerk stared at them in silence. When they mentioned the man, his expression changed. He asked them exactly where they had stopped. When Sarah pointed it out on the map, the clerk shook his head. There hadn't been a service station on that stretch of road in over 30 years. The group never spoke about the incident again until years later. They drifted apart after college, each carrying their own version of that night. Daniel eventually admitted something he had kept to himself. When the man stopped walking, Daniel had noticed the man's shadow stretching across the road under the moonlight. It didn't match his body. It split into two long shadows, reaching in opposite directions, neither lining up with where the man was standing. Sarah still dreams about the smile. In her nightmares, it appears in her rearview mirror, sitting in the back seat, asking if she's late. When the coordinates from the radio were checked years later, they led to an unmarked site near a decommissioned military facility. No explanation was ever given. And no one ever stopped on that stretch of road again without remembering the man who never left footprints. In 1997, a group of college students from Northern California decided to take a road trip through Nevada. 4 friends, all in their early 20s, full of confidence, boredom, and curiosity. They wanted something different, something off the map. That's how they ended up on State Route 375, a stretch of highway known locally as the Extraterrestrial Highway. Late at night, around 11:40 p.m., their car began to overheat. No cell service, no passing traffic, miles of desert in every direction. They pulled over near a faded road sign and popped the hood. That's when they saw the lights. At first, they looked like distant headlights. But they didn't move like cars. They hovered, swayed, then split into two. One of the friends, Daniel, joked that it was aliens. Another friend, Sarah, told him to shut up. Then the radio turned on by itself. Static, followed by a low voice repeating numbers. Coordinates. The engine died completely. As they argued about what to do, footsteps approached from the darkness. A man emerged into the headlights. Tall, thin, wearing an old military-style jacket. He smiled too wide and asked if they needed help. Relieved, they said yes. He told them there was a service station about a mile down the road and offered to guide them. Against Sarah's instincts, they followed him. The walk felt wrong immediately. The man never spoke again. His footsteps didn't match the sound they should have made on gravel. Halfway there, Daniel whispered that they should turn back. The man stopped walking. Without turning around, he said, "You're already late." Then he stepped off the road and vanished into the desert. Panicked, the group ran back to the car, only to find the hood closed and the engine running. Inside the car, the radio was still on. The coordinates had changed. Years later, Daniel would confess something he never told the others. When the man stopped walking, Daniel saw his shadow stretch unnaturally long across the road, splitting into two directions, neither matching the man's position. In 2014, a woman named Linda moved into an apartment building in Brooklyn that had once been a hospital. Renovated, modernized, and marketed as luxury living. The past was barely mentioned. From the beginning, Linda felt watched. Not constantly, just in moments. Passing mirrors, elevator reflections, the feeling of someone standing just behind her when no one was there. Things began to move. Her keys would change places. Cabinets left open, the shower curtain drawn when she knew she hadn't touched it. She installed security cameras inside the apartment. For days, nothing happened. Then, one night at 3:09 a.m., the footage showed Linda standing in her kitchen. She was asleep in bed at the time. The figure looked exactly like her. Same clothes, same hair, same posture. It stood perfectly still for nearly 7 minutes before slowly turning its head toward the camera and smiling. Linda woke up at that exact moment with a nosebleed. She checked the footage again later. The timestamp matched her sleep tracker. Police dismissed it as a glitch. But the occurrences continued. The figure appeared again weeks later, closer to the camera. The smile wider, the eyes wrong. A building maintenance worker eventually told her the truth. During renovations, several sealed rooms had been discovered in the basement. Old patient records, experimental treatment notes, rooms without windows. One room had no door at all. Linda moved out. The final footage from her last night shows her locking the door, turning off the lights, and leaving. 30 seconds later, the camera captures the apartment lights turning back on. The figure is already inside. Those were 3 very disturbing true scary stories. If you're still listening, ask yourself this. How well do you really know the place you're in right now? And before you go, tell us in the comments, from which part of the country are you watching this?